Hi, so I'm Zach Richter, and my presentation is called um, Lived Objects, Prosthetic Agency, and the Question of Object-Oriented Ontology within an Ecological Disability Studies Framework. Um, and I'm gonna start by saying that the main theorists I'm using for this work are Kate Barad, whose book entitled uh, whose book entitled Meeting the Universe Halfway is really important to the new field of critical object orientation. And Barad's thesis focuses on the entanglement of matter, and she's using Niels Bohr to consider the entanglement of matter. Um, and what's interesting from an ecological disability studies framework is that a major means by which uh, um, Barad uses to think about objects and think about the entanglement of you know the social within the object and kind of the co-entanglement of matter is that she uses this idea of a blind person who is feeling the world with a cane, right? And that's an idea which is in Bohr's writing also, and and it's very important to her to theorize what she calls agential realism in order to ascribe a greater degree of agency to objects, and to question what she calls the cut, which is this idea that, you know, between me and this laptop and between me and this table, that there's a separation between the subject and the object, you know. So there's a separation in most discussion of matter, and her criticism is of what makes that cut a thing. And so some of us are already familiar with Sarah Ahmed's work, which is the book, which among that work is most important to me is a book called Queer Phenomenology. And Queer Phenomenology posits the table, and the table is this object which is queered, you know, and she considers how it's kind of a centering device for, you know, the family as part of, you know, this idea of heteronormativity that comes from queer theory, you know. And so the table is interesting to think about because it is an object that that has kind of the social forces of heteronormativity, which Warner and Berlant think of as, you know, the rightness of the metacultural intelligibility of heterosexual culture is placed upon this family table, you know, that is kind of assumed, you know, this object which we regard as physical. It has this social and political power, you know, and it gets that partially from its spatial effort, but partially from how it centers the subject. So this is an object that we're living through, and that gets me to my the subject of my presentation, which is the lived object. And so in Barad's work, we hear that intentionality might be better understood as attributable to a complex network of human and non-human agents, including historically specific sets of material conditions, and that phenomena are the ontological inseparability and entanglement of interacting agencies, and that is phenomena are ontologically primitive relations without and kind of interacting forces which transcend kind of boundaries. And so once more, in this example of the blind person who's traversing a space with their cane, Barad's focus is on how the texture of the surface that the blind person is traversing kind of sticks out to them, and that for her is an example of interaction. But I would like to take the thesis a little bit further in order to suggest that first of all, Barad isn't taking into consideration the moments in which there's kind of an ambiguity for the blind person, in which it's not clear what's happening to them, in which they get kind of confused, and so when we take into consideration that ambiguity, we're forced to think about, how real and how consistent that texture is, and we know that that texture is not always present. That there must be an effort of reaching out and feeling out to feel that texture. And so, what I would aim to posit is that the prosthetic device of the or the device which is used to feel, which is in this case, the cane, is an object which is lived through. It's a lived object, and that object is kind of this place where the entanglement plays out to a greater degree than the texture of this outer world. So I'm contradicting Barad here, and what that means, I'm going to explore that using Merleau-Ponty. And Merleau-Ponty is, of course, and Barad is also referring to him a lot. He's Foucault's teacher. He's a Marxist phenomenologist, and he for him, what's very important, are the kind of in phenomenology of perception, are the sets of lines which are set out to interpret phenomena, and there's this idea that prior to what can be said, we experience these colors and shapes and all this phenomena, which is without any kind of structure, but that the horizon, one of his ideas of horizon implies a line which is projected, which kind of separates phenomena, within human interpretation, that line has to be very sturdy, and kind of when that line is in question, there's quite a bit of anxiety going on because we're caught, or we're kind of at a loss for what is, and so Barad's thesis asks for that line to no longer be a solid line, and so for us to recognize that horizons are inherently porous, that entanglement means that the matter is kind of making its own space, if you will, and what that suggests is that there's a muddledness to the world. There's a muddledness, and so we get this other element of the kind of prosthetic of the objects that we live through, and that element is that in a situation of muddledness, there is this there is this effort on the part of the person, or maybe in Lacan's figuring the ego. There's an effort to project a meaning onto the object that's being interacted with, and so the agency in making the effort to feel, in extending, to use once more a broad example, and extending one's arm out to feel, and moving one's arm in a specific manner, starting on the left, for instance, or or starting on the right, implies a personal agency on the part of the cane user. Implies an agency about the world. What would be called an orientation. So the lived object we recognize as this place which is kind of a liminal space in which multiple agencies are intermingling, multiple forces of agency, multiple intentionalities are kind of colliding, and so we have to imagine that in the sense that a limb, or an arm, or a prosthetic arm, or a conjured item of speech is prosthetic in that it is subject to in that it enables the subject. This thing between the self and the outer world that the ego or self is using to grasp out is touched and affected by the environment and by the agency of the body. They feel these objects act as kind of outer extensions of one's agency, in that they're limited in the same way that one's agency would be limited. And when we get this, because there is the stigma. The stigma is not only given to the person, but when you reach out, a limb or an aspect of your person which seems out of order, that limb is in turn targeted by ableist limitation and stigma. I like to use an example which fits a current effort I'm working in, which is that of just fluency. The stutter is kind of a prosthetic, and it is a part of the person which is stretching out. But the stutter itself, it is the cut cuts it off from the person, and that's because it is a limb which is occupying space, which is occupying space in an unexpected way, and so it is we see the cut as in terms of the stutter as separating the stutter from the stutterer, and that's because the stutter as a as a part of the body, which as a thing which is put out from the self, um, has its agency taken up by the world of ableist social meaning, in terms of its unfinishedness, in terms of its unevenness, and the stutter itself, the moment of disfluency in speech, or a gnarled limb in the case of physical disability, or the cane for a blind person. These extensions of disability are themselves objects, but in the sense that they are viewed as external to what is normal, when a normate subject finds these objects extended onto them, there's a reaction of pushing away, and we also see this in the case of a cage, and in the case of perhaps a dirtied floor, the object which the object has social assumptions projected upon it is by the public kind of worlds of social meaning, and so when we see theorists like Ahmed battling, noting how the table is used in this heteronormative way against queer people and can be used in a misogynist way against gendered people, there's a battle being waged to kind of liberate the lived object, and to reflect upon that object's role in collective material consciousness, and likewise, an eco-disability framework would aim to liberate the parts of the animal from being completely tools, and so we see vegans or other animal rights activists repudiating products made with meat because of this knowledge that in the sense that those objects are made through being cut away from the subject, that they are imbued with a social meaning which is strictly of exploited use, but their existence as part of an independent agency of the animal is disregarded. Similarly, we see disabled people pushing for things like mad pride, or pushing for wheelchairs to be regarded as objects which are needed and useful, but which are not bound to the person, and acceptance of prostheses being shown, and not wanting to hide or cover these disabled parts. So in these cases, battles for animal rights or disability rights are being waged, in the Constitution and in the makeup of the object itself. There is it's kind of a paradox that an object can be both used by an outer sphere of collective social concern, and also being used by an agency as in terms of the material navigation of objects. But that paradox can work with this phenomenological theory of the horizon, in the sense that that the connection of the object to a person and the connection of the object to an environment can be viewed as more inconsistent. And so you know, this scholarly project exists, you know, in order to critique some efforts in post-structuralist new materialism, which would understand objects, you know, and an affect completely separate from movements for identity and movements for equal rights and movements against capitalism. You know, that they would aim to eschew the object and eschew affect and place these kind of pieces of reality into an intersubjective interplay, you know, and place them into a symbolic economy, you know, in a Lacanian style, but ignore that they're in fact battlegrounds between a collective agency which would disavow them and a personal agency which acts through them, you know, and so it is a problem to me when you know, critical object orientation or recent post-structuralism material theorizing misses or evades, you know, that multiple agencies are present in the object, and I think that what Ahmed does very well is Ahmed's example of the table kind of reveals the sense in which the phenomenon of the table is overtaken by the phenomenon of the family, which uses it as a gathering point, and in the conversation about objects, I would hope that more people involved in eco-criticism, people involved in, you know, critical animal studies, as well as people involved in disability studies and critical disability studies, make an effort to retake objects as part of their struggle, you know, and make an effort to challenge this trend which Barad kind of occupies toward viewing objects as completely separate from these struggles and trying to use, you know, their idea that objects have an acting agency, which I'm not saying they don't, trying to use that as a way of freeing these objects from a conversation with more liberationist elements, you know, and that is to say that merely saying that the object has a texture and you know and act on its own is not enough, because it's acting on its own. Also, it is acting on its own as well as it is being acted through both by a wider social culture and by an individual agent which materially pushes through it or touches it or must use it. So you know, you know, we get this understanding here, you know, as I'm ending my presentation, that the object is you know, it is beset by a multiplicity of forces which are all acting through it and acting in it and acting with it, and so there is no, its agency is not alone, but its agency is kind of being pulled back and forth in, I would say, 2 to 3 different directions. And this is to the, you know, and finally I will add that we have to consider the extent to which the extent to which objects can be used for a disability agenda, which would argue that everyone is using objects, you know, to extend their will, and used by an animal agenda, which would consider, you know, the sense in which animal objects, you know, still retain an animal agency, you know, And so I'm going to close my presentation here because I've already gone over time. And thank you.